My father demoted me from daughter to storage. Your sister needs your room for the twins, he said. You'll sleep in the basement. He even took my car keys. He mistook my silence for weakness. He forgot my profession. He forgot about the 20-page report I gave him, the one detailing the black mold and the cracked foundation. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The diagnosis had come on a Tuesday, delivered by a doctor with kind eyes and a sterile, clipped tone. Severe iron deficiency anemia, exacerbated by what he called chronic occupational stress. I was sitting on the crinkly paper of the exam table, my work blazer feeling too heavy on my shoulders, my vision swimming slightly. "You need to rest, Rebecca," the doctor had insisted, handing me a stack of prescriptions. "I mean it. Your body is running on empty." I drove home that afternoon feeling brittle, like a single tap would shatter me. I was 29, a licensed structural engineer, and I had spent the last 5 years working 60-hour weeks. I hadn't just been building my career, I'd been rebuilding my parents' financial stability. I'd moved back in after college when my father, Ian, was forced into early retirement, and my mother's part-time admin job wasn't enough. I paid for the new roof, the upgraded electrical panel, and, as a gift to myself, the complete renovation of my childhood bedroom into a proper adult suite. It was my sanctuary. I walked into the house, the prescriptions clutched in my hand, ready to tell my father that I needed to take a few days off, that I was sick. I found him in the living room with my younger sister, Margaret. Margaret, or Maggie, as she insisted on being called, was 27 and floated through life on a cloud of entitlement. While I'd been studying for my PE exam, she had been hopping between retail jobs, quitting each one with a dramatic flair. Now she was back, 5 months pregnant with twins, the father already out of the picture. She was sitting on the sofa, feet up on the coffee table, eating ice cream directly from the carton. "There she is," my father said. He didn't stand up. He didn't ask how my doctor's appointment went, though he knew I'd been feeling dizzy for weeks. "Rebecca, perfect," Maggie said, pointing her spoon at me. "We need to talk about the car." I blinked, the fatigue making my thoughts slow. "What about my car?" "Well, I can't exactly take the bus to my appointments, can I? Not with twins," she said, patting her stomach. "And you just take the train to work anyway. So Dad and I agreed it's better if I just take over the lease." I looked at my father, stunned. "Take over? Maggie, I bought that car. It's not a lease, and I need it for site visits." My father sighed, a deep, put-upon sound. "Rebecca, don't be selfish. Your sister is in a delicate condition. You can use the train, or I can drive you if it's really necessary." He gestured for me to sit down, but not in a kind way. It was a summons. "That's not even the main thing," Ian said, his tone shifting from impatient to cold. It was a tone I hadn't heard from him since my mother passed away 3 years ago. "Maggie's moving in. Permanently." "I know that," I said, my voice small. "I'm happy to help. We can clear out the guest room." "The guest room is too small for 2 cribs and all her things," my father interrupted. "She needs space to set up a proper nursery." A cold, heavy dread settled in my stomach, worse than the anemia. "What are you saying?" "We're giving her your room." I stared at him, the room I had designed, the room I had paid for, the room with the reinforced subfloor for my drafting table, the soundproofed walls, the en suite bathroom I'd had installed last year. My sanctuary. What? The word came out as a breath. You're not special anymore, Rebecca, my father said, and the cruelty in his voice was so casual it felt like a physical slap. You're a single woman with a good job. Margaret is a mother. She has needs. From now on, your car's your sister's and you'll sleep in the basement. She needs the space for her twins. The room tilted. My prescriptions felt impossibly heavy. You'll sleep in the basement. The words echoed in my head, mixing with the doctor's warning. The basement. The damp, dark, unfinished space where my mother's old holiday decorations went to decay. The space with the smell. Dad, the basement, I whispered, my mind racing over load-bearing walls, moisture readings, and the report I had filed. Don't be dramatic, it's fine. We'll move your old mattress down there, he said, waving his hand dismissively. Maggie smiled, a sweet, victorious little smile, as she dug her spoon back into the ice cream. Thanks, Becca. It'll be so much better for the babies. I looked from her, smug-faced, to my father's cold, resolute one. I saw that I wasn't his daughter anymore. I was an obstacle, and resource to be liquidated. My head was pounding, my body screaming for rest, but in that moment, something inside me went perfectly, terrifyingly still. I felt the brittle pieces of myself lock into place, forming not a shattered mess, but a shield. I nodded, my face a mask of calm. Okay, I said, my voice even. If that's what you think is best, I'll start moving my things tonight. My father looked relieved. Maggie looked triumphant. I nodded again, calmly. By Saturday, I added, my mind already working. My Aunt Carol and Uncle James are visiting for dinner on Saturday, right? I'd like to be settled by then. Good, my father said, turning back to the television. That's a good girl. He had no idea what he had just done. He hadn't just demoted me. He had unleashed me. He had forgotten who I was, what I did, and the precise, documented danger that lived beneath our feet. The betrayal was worse than the diagnosis itself. The next 48 hours were a blur of calculated surrender. My body was still weak from the anemia, but my mind was sharp, fueled by a cold, precise rage. I felt like one of my own structures. The exterior was calm, but the internal tensile strength was being tested to its absolute limit. I spent Wednesday evening packing. I didn't pack everything. I packed my essentials, my work clothes, my toiletries, my laptop, and the heavy-duty binders that contained my active project files. I left the custom-built bookshelves. I left the expensive blackout curtains. I left the solid oak desk I'd saved for 6 months to buy. I let Maggie direct me, her voice filled with a chipper, grating authority. "Oh, you can just leave that chair," she'd said, pointing at my ergonomic drafting stool. "I can use it for nursing. And the dresser, too. The changing table will fit perfectly on top." I just nodded and complied. My father, Ian, watched from the doorway for a few minutes, a look of mild approval on his face. "That's right, Rebecca. Family helps family. Your sister needs this." "Of course, Dad," I'd replied, my voice perfectly neutral as I taped up a box of textbooks. My help, however, had its limits. When my father told me to start moving my mattress, I held up a hand. "I'm not feeling well, Dad. My doctor's appointment? I'm severely anemic. I can't lift heavy furniture. You and Maggie will have to get the mattress down the stairs." This was met with immediate annoyance. "Anemic?" Ian scoffed. "That just means you're tired. Have a steak. We can't move that queen-size thing." "Then I guess I'll sleep on the sofa until you can," I said flatly. Grumbling, my father recruited one of the neighbors to help him wrestle my mattress and box spring down the narrow, rickety basement stairs. I watched them struggle, their knuckles scraping the cinder block. I heard my father curse as the bottom of the box spring caught on the damp concrete floor. Later that night, I had a phone call. I took it out on the back porch, breathing in the cool night air. "Hi, Greg," I said, keeping my voice low. Greg was my lawyer, a sharp man my age who specialized in contract and property law. I'd sent him a package of documents via courier that afternoon. "Rebecca," he said, his voice all business. "I got the file, and I have to say this is fascinating. You co-signed the refinance mortgage, the one used for the renovations." "Yes," I confirmed. Dad's retirement income wasn't enough to secure the loan, so I put my name and my salary on the line. I've also been making half the payments. And you've been paying the homeowner's insurance premium directly. For 3 years, ever since Dad forgot and they almost lost the policy. There was a pause. I could hear him tapping a pen. "And this report," he said, and I could hear the change in his tone. "This is your official, stamped engineering assessment." "It is," I said. "Air quality tests, moisture readings, infrared photography of the foundation, and a full structural integrity analysis. Stamped with my professional seal. Stashabatries," he whistled, "black mold, and a bowing foundation wall. Rebecca, this isn't just an unfinished basement. You've documented that this space is actively hazardous." "I know," I said. "I gave my father a copy 3 months ago. He dismissed it. Said I was just trying to drum up business for my friends in construction and that a little damp never hurt anyone." "His dismissal is irrelevant," Greg said sharply. "You, as a co-signer on the mortgage and a resident, have formally notified the primary homeowner of a critical, value-destroying, and dangerous flaw in the property. And now he has. What was the word you used?" "Ordered," I supplied. "He ordered me to live in it." "This is better than negligence, Rebecca," Greg said, a note of dark satisfaction in his voice. "This is willful endangerment. No. To mention the insurance implications. Your policy is almost certainly void if they're knowingly housing someone in an area documented as uninhabitable." "That's what I thought," I said, looking through the sliding glass door at Maggie, who was already measuring my bedroom walls for paint. "So what's the plan?" he asked. "For now, nothing. I just needed you to be ready. I'm going to comply. But Aunt Carol and Uncle James are coming for dinner on Saturday. Aunt Carol is a nurse. She knows what mold exposure does to a person." Greg was silent for a moment. "I see. You're not just building a case. You're setting a stage. Very clever. Be careful, Rebecca. Don't sleep down there if you can help it. That air quality report was no joke." "I won't," I promised. "I'm sleeping on the sofa." When I went back inside, my father pointed to the basement door. "Your room is ready." I walked down the steps. The smell hit me immediately, a thick, earthy, sour stench that coated the back of my throat. The single bare bulb overhead illuminated the space. My mattress was shoved against the far wall, the one I had marked in my report with a bright red X. The bowing cinder block wall. A visible crack ran from the floor up to one of the joists, dark and spider-webbed. The air was so heavy and damp that the sheets already felt clammy. I looked at it all, the evidence of my father's absolute, callous disregard. He had forgotten one crucial thing. He saw me as his artsy daughter, the one who was good with numbers. He forgot that I was a structural engineer. He forgot that I don't just see a wall, I see the load it carries, the forces acting upon it, and most importantly, I see its breaking point. And he was about to find his. Living in that house for the next 2 days was like performing a complex piece of theater. On the outside, I was the dutiful, slightly downtrodden daughter. I made coffee in the mornings. I commuted to work on the train, leaving my car keys on the hook for Maggie to take. I came home, ate dinner quietly, and then retreated to the living room sofa, a book in my lap. "I thought you were sleeping in the basement," my father, Ian, said on Thursday night, frowning at me from his recliner. "It's just too cold down there, Dad," I said, my voice mild. "And the smell is musty, my anemia. You know, the doctor said I need to be careful with my lungs until my iron is back up." "Excuses," he grumbled, but he let it drop. He didn't care where I slept as long as I wasn't in her room. My sister, Margaret, was in full nesting mode, and her entitlement radiated from her like a heat wave. She had already bought gallons of pastel pink paint and was directing our father to tape the baseboards of my old room. "It's going to be so perfect," she gushed at dinner, which I had cooked. "We're going to put one crib against this wall and one against that wall, and the changing table goes right where Rebecca's ugly old desk was." I just kept eating my pasta, my face a mask of neutrality. My father, on the other hand, was glowing with a renewed sense of purpose. Ian had been a sales manager for a mid-level pharmaceutical company before he was pushed into early retirement. He was a man who understood hierarchy and status, and with my mother gone and his job lost, he had felt adrift. Now, Maggie's pregnancy had given him a new project, grandfather. And in his mind, this new role required a clear supporting cast. Maggie was the star, and I was the stagehand. My relationship with my father had always been strained by his expectations. I was the smart one, the one who was supposed to be a doctor or a lawyer. When I chose engineering, a dirty, unfeminine job, as he'd called it, he'd been audibly disappointed. My success, my salary, my ability to financially support him. He took those as his due. He saw the money I poured into his house not as a gift, but as my rent. My devotion had been boundless. I'd stayed up with him for nights on end after my mother's passing, managing the bills, the estate, his grief. I'd put my own plans to buy a condo on hold indefinitely to ensure he could keep this house. I'd spent over $40,000 of my own savings on the new roof, the electrical, and my own room, all to make the house safer and more comfortable for him. In contrast, there was Maggie. She was the one who looked like our mother. The pretty one, the charming one. She had always been able to get whatever she wanted from our father with a pout or a well-timed tear. She had dropped out of community college, maxed out 3 credit cards that I'd ended up paying off to stop the collectors, and had a history of dating men who were, to put it mildly, unstable. This pregnancy was just the latest in a long line of crises she had manufactured, and as always, she expected everyone else to fix it. She was the perfect antagonist, all soft smiles and sharp, selfish edges. "Becca, sweetie," she said on Friday evening, catching me as I was packing my work bag. "Since you're not really using the basement for anything but storage, would you mind if I put some of my old stuff down there? My baby furniture from when I was little is in the attic, and it's just so dusty up there. The basement is much easier." I looked at her. Her eyes were wide and innocent, her hand resting on her stomach. She wanted to store baby furniture in a room contaminated with stachybotrys. "I don't think that's a good idea, Maggie," I said, my voice tight. "Oh, why not?" she pouted. "It's not like you're using the space." The air down there, it's not good, it's damp. It will ruin the old wood. Don't be silly, my father's voice cut in from the living room. It's fine. Help your sister, Rebecca. You can move that stuff down there tomorrow before your aunt and uncle arrive. The sheer, staggering ignorance of it, ordering me to move antique baby furniture into a mold-infested pit that he also expected me to sleep in, was almost too much. The trap wasn't just set, they were actively baiting it themselves. Actually, Dad, I can't, I said, slinging my bag over my shoulder. I have to go to the office tomorrow morning for a few hours. A project deadline. I'll be back just before they get here. Work on a Saturday, he scoffed. You work too much, Rebecca. It's not healthy. I have to, I said. It's important. He didn't know what I was working on. I wasn't going to the office to finish a project. I was going to the office to use the high-speed plotter. I was going to print a fresh, large format, 24x 36-inch copy of the basement's structural analysis, complete with the color-coded infrared photos showing the moisture saturation and the high-resolution images of the cracked foundation wall. I was going to make my evidence impossible to ignore. Saturday morning was electric with tension. While Maggie and my father bustled around, preparing my old room for its new occupants, I slipped out of the house at 8 a.m. My excuse was the project deadline, a half-truth. The project was my life. My office was a cathedral of glass and steel, blessedly silent on a weekend. I unlocked my office, the senior structural engineer plaque on the door seeming to gleam with a new, ironic light. I wasn't just an engineer, I was an investigator, and the case I was building was against my own family. My clever trap was simple, the truth, but the truth, I knew, was useless unless it was presented with irrefutable, overwhelming force. My father was a man who blustered his way out of facts. My sister was a woman who cried her way out of consequences. My trap couldn't be sprung by me alone, it needed a witness. It needed an audience that they couldn't dismiss or manipulate. And that audience was arriving at 4 p.m. I unrolled the original schematics of the house I had drawn up 3 months ago. On my computer, I pulled up the 20-page report. My hands flew across the keyboard, not with the weariness of the past few weeks, but with a sudden, surging clarity. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was a professional. I isolated the key exhibits. Exhibit A, the air quality report. I highlighted the spore count. Stachybotrys chartarum, 4,000 spores per cubic meter. The EPA guideline for elevated is 1,000. It wasn't just musty, it was toxic. I added a separate sheet with layman's terms, sourced from the CDC website, detailing the effects: respiratory distress, neurological issues, immune system suppression. Especially dangerous, I noted, for pregnant women and infants. Exhibit B, the infrared thermal images. They were beautiful in their own terrible way. Bright blue and purple blooms showed exactly where moisture was wicking up through the cinder block from the faulty drainage outside. The wall my mattress was pressed against was a solid, chilling cobalt. Exhibit C, the high-resolution photographs of the foundation wall itself. I'd used a ruler in the shots. The primary vertical crack was over 3/8 of an inch wide, but the real danger, the one my father had ignored, was the horizontal bowing. The wall was visibly buckling inward. Exhibit D, the cost analysis. I had obtained 3 separate quotes from certified foundation and remediation specialists. The total to excavate, seal the exterior, install a new sump pump, remediate the mold, and reinforce the bowing wall with carbon fiber straps. $64,500. I printed everything. I plotted the large format diagrams. I slipped the smaller pages into clear plastic sleeves and organized them all into a sleek black binder. On the cover, I printed a simple label: Structural and Environmental Assessment, 124 Oak Street. I then called my lawyer, Greg. "It's Saturday," he answered, sounding amused. "I'm billing you double for this, Rebecca." "It's fine," I said, the plotter humming behind me. "I just have one more question. The insurance policy, I've read it. It has an uninhabitable spaces clause. And the mortgage," I pulled the C. "O sign agreement. It has a duty to maintain property clause." "Let me guess," Greg said. "You're wondering what happens when a co-signer, who is also a licensed engineer, has proof that the primary homeowner is willfully violating both clauses." "Exactly," I said. "What happens," Greg said slowly, "is that the co-signer, that's you, is in an incredibly powerful position. You could report the breach to the insurance company, which would likely cancel the policy outright. And you could petition the mortgage lender, arguing that your investment is in jeopardy due to the primary's negligence, which could trigger a demand for immediate repayment of the entire loan. It's the financial equivalent of a nuclear bomb, Rebecca. You'd be blowing up your own investment, too." "But I wouldn't be," I said, a cold, hard certainty in my voice. "Because my name is on the deed as well as of that refinancing. I'm not just a co-signer, I'm a co-owner. I'm not just a resident. I'm an engineer who has documented a clear and present danger. They aren't just putting me at risk, they're putting my asset at risk." There was a long silence. "My God, Rebecca," Greg finally said, his voice full of respect. "You're right. You're not a tenant he can abuse. You're a partner he's defrauding. This changes everything. You hold all the cards. The house can't be sold without you, it can't be insured without you, and it can't be fixed without you. What do you want to do?" I looked at the black binder on my desk. "I want to have dinner," I said. "I'll call you tomorrow." I drove home in a rental car I'd picked up using my own credit card and arrived at 3:30 p.m. I walked in to find the house smelling of roasted chicken. My father was in a good mood. "There you are, working on a Saturday, honestly," he boomed. "Go get cleaned up. Carol and James will be here any minute, and wear something nice, not one of those drab work things." "Okay, Dad," I said. I went not to the sofa, but to the basement door. I descended the stairs, the binder in my tote bag. The smell hit me, and for the first time, it didn't just feel like an insult, it felt like a crime scene. I placed my bag on the damp mattress, my bed. Then I went back up to the hall bathroom to change. The trap was set. The witnesses were about to arrive. The doorbell rang at 4:02 p.m. My father, Ian, swung the door open, his face split in a wide, welcoming grin. "Carol, James, get in here." Aunt Carol was my father's younger sister, but they were opposites in every way. Where Ian was bluster and pride, Carol was quiet observation and empathy. She was a registered nurse in the pediatric oncology ward, a woman who had seen real suffering and had no patience for manufactured drama. Uncle James, her husband, was an accountant, a man who saw the world in ledgers of black and red. He was kind, logical, and had always been my quiet champion, sending me textbooks on advanced mathematics in college. "Ian, it's so good to see you," Carol said, hugging my father before her eyes immediately scanned the room looking for me. "Where's Rebecca?" "Oh, she's here," Ian said, waving his hand. "Maggie, come say hello." Margaret emerged from the kitchen, all smiles and blooming pregnancy. Aunt Carol, Uncle James, it's so good to see you. Carol's eyes lit up with genuine warmth. Margaret, dear, look at you. Oh, congratulations, sweetheart, twins, how exciting. They fussed over her for a moment, and I watched from the hallway. My father was beaming proprietary. Yep, she's moving back in. We're going to take care of her. Oh, that's wonderful, Carol said. But where's Rebecca? I'm right here, Aunt Carol, I said, stepping into the living room. Carol's smile faltered as she took me in. I was pale, the anemia wasn't a lie. I was wearing simple dark slacks and a blouse, and I knew I looked exhausted. She rushed over and pulled me into a hug, her hand immediately going to my forehead. Rebecca, you look terrible, she whispered, her voice laced with professional concern. Are you ill? I'm just a little anemic, Auntie, I said quietly, hugging her back. Anemic, Ian boomed, overhearing. She's fine, she just works too hard. We've been telling her. Anyway, Maggie cut in, redirecting the attention. We have so much to tell you. We're converting Rebecca's old room into the nursery. It's the only one big enough. Uncle James frowned slightly. Is that right? That's a big change. Where are you staying, Rebecca? I thought you'd finally gotten that room perfect. This was the moment. My father, completely oblivious, walked right into it. Oh, she's fine, Ian said with a laugh, clapping James on the shoulder. We moved her down to the basement, plenty of space down there. The air in the room changed. Aunt Carol's head snapped toward my father. The basement? Ian, what are you talking about? The unfinished basement. It's fine, Carol, don't fuss, Ian said, his tone aller. Edie defensive. It's just temporary until she gets her own place. It's perfectly safe. I want to see it, Carol said, her voice quiet but firm. Why? Ian said, flustered. It's just a basement. We're about to have dinner. I want to see where my niece is sleeping, Carol insisted, her nurse's demeanor clicking into place. She started walking toward the basement door in the hall. Carol, really? It's not a big deal, my father said, trying to wave her off. Maggie looked uncomfortable, sensing the shift in the mood. Dad, I said, my voice clear and cutting through the tension. It's okay, let her. The light switch is at the top of the stairs. My father shot me a look, furious at my compliance. But Aunt Carol was already at the door. She opened it. She didn't even take a step down. She just stood at the threshold, her hand flying to her mouth. The smell, that thick, undeniable miasma of mold and decay, wafted up the stairs, filling the hallway. It was no longer a background note. It was an accusation. Aunt Carol gasped. It wasn't a small, polite sound. It was a sharp, horrified intake of breath that was so loud, the entire house went silent. Oh my God, she whispered, her eyes wide. She reflexively put an arm out as if to block Uncle James from the fumes. Ian, what is that smell? Uncle James stepped up behind her and looked down into the darkness, his face hardening. What is that? It's nothing, my father said, his voice too loud. It's just a little damp. It's an old house. Ian, Carol said, turning to face him, and her voice was shaking with a rage I had never heard from her. That is not damp. That is mold. I can smell it from here. You're having her sleep down there. She's not even sleeping there, Ian sputtered, grasping for a defense. She's been sleeping on the sofa. She's being dramatic. Because it's uninhabitable, Carol shot back. My God, Ian, I work with immunocompromised children. I know what Stashabatrice smells like. Are you trying to kill her? The whole house was silent. Maggie had gone pale. My father looked like he'd been struck. "Now, Carol, don't you dare exaggerate," my father blustered, his face turning a blotchy red. "She's an engineer. She would know if it was dangerous." And there it was, the opening he had given me. "You're right, Dad," I said, my voice perfectly calm, perfectly steady. "I do know, and I told you." I walked past my stunned aunt, down 2 steps into the basement, and retrieved the black binder from my bag. I walked back up into the hallway, which was now crowded with my silent, horrified family. I didn't hand the binder to my father. I handed it to my Uncle James. "Uncle James," I said, my voice professional. "As an accountant, you'll appreciate the cost analysis on page 19. But as my uncle, I'd like you to start with Exhibit A, the air quality report." Uncle James, his face grim, opened the binder. Aunt Carol read over his shoulder, her hand still over her mouth. "3 months ago," I said, my voice resonating in the silence, "I gave my father a copy of this 20-page structural and environmental assessment. I begged him to let me hire a remediation team. I warned him about the black mold, the faulty wiring, and the bowing foundation wall. I told him it was a $60,000 fix, minimum. I told him the space was toxic." I turned my gaze from my uncle's shocked face to my father's terrified one. "And do you remember what you said, Dad?" I asked, my voice as cold and hard as steel. "You said I was trying to squeeze money out of you, and that a little damp never hurt anyone. You ordered me to sleep down there. You even told me to store baby furniture down there." Aunt Carol let out a small, strangled sob, her eyes flying to Maggie's pregnant stomach, and then back to my father with a look of pure loathing. Uncle James just kept turning the pages. He got to the color-coded infrared images of the moisture. He got to the high-resolution photos of the crack. His face, the face of a man who understands numbers, risk, and liability, grew harder with every page. He made you, and you're anemic," Aunt Carol was whispering, her mind connecting the dots. "Ian, she's sick because of this house. You've been poisoning her." "That's not true," Ian roared, but it was the roar of a cornered animal. "She's fine. It's just a report. It's just paper." "It's not just paper, Dad," I said. "It's a professionally sealed engineering document. It's evidence, and you ignored it." The confrontation was over. The truth was out. The silence in the house was no longer quiet. It was screaming. The aftermath of the reveal was catastrophic. Aunt Carol, fueled by a nurse's fury, took charge. "James, help Rebecca get her things," she commanded, her voice leaving no room for argument. "She is not staying in this death trap 1 more second. Rebecca, sweetheart, pack a bag, just the essentials. You're coming with us." "You are." "Not," my father Ian yelled, his face purple. "This is my house. I am your father. You will not disrespect me like this." "Disrespect," Aunt Carol rounded on him, her eyes blazing. "You ordered your sick daughter to sleep in a toxic pit so your other daughter could steal her room. You're lucky I don't call Adult Protective Services, Ian, or the county inspector." "This is a family matter, Carol," he shot back. "It stopped being a family matter when you willfully endangered your child's life," Uncle James said, his voice a low, cold rumble. He hadn't stopped looking at the report. He finally closed the binder and held it like it was a weapon. "Ian," James said, "as an accountant, I'm looking at this quote. $64,500. As a co-owner of this house," he tapped the cover of the binder. "Rebecca warned you about a liability that could bankrupt you. and you ignored her. As a homeowner, I'm looking at this picture of a bowing foundation wall. This entire house is at risk. Maggie, who had been silent this whole time, finally burst into tears. "This is all your fault," she shrieked, pointing at me. "You're ruining everything. You're just jealous. You can't stand that I'm finally getting something and you're not." "Jealous?" I asked, my voice devoid of emotion. "Jealous of what, Maggie? That you're moving into a room I paid for, in a house that's structurally unsound. That you were about to put your unborn twins to sleep in a room directly above a basement filled with neurotoxic mold." Aunt Carol's head whipped around. "Is that right? Her room is directly over this basement." "It is," I confirmed. "The spores don't just stay downstairs, Aunt Carol. The HVAC system circulates them. I have the vent readings in there, too. This whole house is contaminated, but the basement is ground zero." Maggie's face went from angry to terrified. "What? Is that true, Dad?" My father just stood there, opening and closing his mouth, his bluster completely gone. He was finally utterly exposed. He knew he'd been caught. He had no defense against the printed, stamped, and verified truth. "Rebecca, go pack," Aunt Carol said, her voice softening as she looked at me. "James and I will handle your father." I nodded and walked past them, up the stairs to my old room. It was a mess of Maggie's things, bags of baby clothes, a half-assembled crib, and open paint cans. I grabbed my suitcase from the back of the closet, the one I'd never fully unpacked, and began filling it with the clothes and files I had strategically left behind. Downstairs, I could hear the muffled, sharp tones of the argument. "How could you let this happen, Ian?" Aunt Carol's voice was rising. "She's your daughter, the one who has been paying your bills, the one who kept this roof over your head." It wasn't. I didn't think it was that serious," my father defended, his voice weak. "You didn't want to think," Uncle James cut in. "This report is dated 3 months ago. You had time, you just didn't want to spend the money. You'd rather just throw Rebecca away. What about her car? I saw her car in the driveway, but she told me she took a rental." "Maggie needs it," Ian said. "She bought that car, Ian," James roared, and I'd never heard my uncle raise his voice. "I saw the bill of sale when she was figuring out the taxes. You stole your daughter's car and gave it to your other daughter." I zipped up my suitcase and my laptop bag. I walked calmly down the stairs, pulling my rolling suitcase behind me. The 4 of them were in a frozen tableau in the living room. My father, defeated. Maggie, crying silently on the sofa. My aunt and uncle, standing like twin pillars of judgment. "I'm ready," I said. Aunt Carol and Uncle James moved toward the door with me. "Rebecca," my father said, his voice suddenly small. Don't do this, don't leave. We can fix this. We'll clear out the guest room for you." I stopped at the front door. I turned to look at him. "Fix this," I said. "There's no fixing this, Dad. You made your choice. You told me I wasn't special anymore. You told me to sleep in the basement. You prioritized Maggie's wants over my literal health and safety. You didn't just dismiss my report. You dismissed me." "But the house, your sister," he stammered. "That brings me to my last point," I said, reaching into my bag and pulling out 2 more documents. I handed them to Uncle James. "Uncle James, as an accountant, you'll find these interesting." He took them. "What are they?" "The first," I said, "is a copy of the homeowner's insurance policy, the one I pay for. I've highlighted the uninhabitable spaces clause. The one that says the entire policy is void if the homeowners knowingly house someone in a space deemed unfit for habitation. That report, I nodded to the binder in his other hand, is proof that you, Dad, have been knowingly doing just that. As of this moment, this house has no insurance. My father's fa. See went ash gray. The second document, I continued, is the mortgage refinance agreement. The one I co-signed. The one that makes me part owner of this house. It has a duty to maintain property clause. By willfully ignoring a $64,000 structural and environmental hazard, you have put my asset at risk. You have breached the contract. I looked at my father, at his crumbling world. On Monday morning, I said, my voice clear and final, my lawyer is contacting the bank. He will inform them that one of the co-owners is willfully destroying the collateral. They have two options. They can either force a buyout, meaning you'll have to buy me out of my share of the house and qualify for the mortgage on your own, or they will call the entire loan. Due immediately. No, Ian whispered. Rebecca, you can't. You have no job, Dad, I said, the final cold facts landing. You have no savings. Maggie has no income. You cannot afford to fix this house. You cannot afford to buy me out. And you cannot afford to pay back the $300,000 loan. You have destroyed this family. You have destroyed this house. All because you couldn't stand that I was special, and you wanted to give your little princess a new playroom. Maggie let out a wail. My father just stared at me, his face a mask of absolute abject horror. He had finally understood. Rebecca, Aunt Carol said, her voice gentle, let's go. I turned my back on them, on the house I had tried to save, on the man I had given everything to. I stepped out into the cool evening air, and for the first time in my life, I felt the crushing weight of that house lift off my shoulders. I was free. The showdown had been clinical and precise, but the fallout was immediate and messy. As I walked to my rental car with Aunt Carol and Uncle James, my father, Ian, stumbled out onto the porch, his face a mask of desperate, cornered panic. Rebecca, wait, please, he shouted, his voice cracking. You can't just leave. We're family. You'll make us homeless. I paused with my hand on the car door, the setting sun casting long, dramatic shadows across the lawn. The entire neighborhood was quiet. I'm not making you anything, Dad, I said, my voice carrying clearly in the still air. You did this. You made this choice when you dismissed my report. You made this choice when you handed my car keys to Maggie. You made this choice when you told me to sleep in a room that could have killed me. I didn't know, he pleaded, a pathetic attempt to reclaim his ignorance. I didn't believe it was that bad. That's the entire point. Aunt Carol snapped, stepping in front of me like a lioness. You chose not to believe your daughter, the structural engineer. You chose to believe it was all a fantasy because the truth was too expensive. You were willing to risk her life to save a buck and placate your irresponsible favorite. From inside the house, we heard a crash. Maggie shrieked, Dad, the paint, it's, oh my God, the wall. My father's head whipped around. He ran back inside. Uncle James, Aunt Carol, and I followed, stopping at the threshold of the living room. We had a clear view down the hall to my old bedroom, now Maggie's nursery. Maggie was standing in the middle of the room, pointing at the wall she shared with the hallway, the wall directly above the bowing foundation wall in the basement. A huge, jagged crack had just appeared, running from the floor halfway up to the ceiling. A piece of drywall had fallen away, revealing the lath and plaster beneath. The can of pink paint she'd set on the floor had tipped over, and a Pepto-Bismol-colored tide was spreading across the hardwood floors I had paid to refinish. The house was literally breaking apart. Maggie was hyperventilating, her hands clutching her stomach. "It's not safe. The house is falling. Oh my God, the babies." "It's the foundation, Ian," Uncle James said, his voice grim. "That wall downstairs is failing. The load from this floor, it's giving way. This house isn't just toxic, it's unstable." My father looked at the crack, at the spilled paint, at his hysterical pregnant daughter, and then at me. His face was a canvas of pure, unadulterated defeat. The problem he had ignored, the one I had warned him about, was no longer a report in a binder. It was a physical, undeniable scar tearing his house apart. This was the true climax. Not my speech, but the house's own scream for help. What do I do?" my father whispered, looking at me, not as his daughter, but as the engineer, the expert, the only one in the room who understood the disaster he was facing. I looked at him, at the man who had called me not special, who had taken everything from me, and I felt nothing, just a cold, empty quiet. "What you do, Dad," I said, "is you call a structural engineer, and a mold remediation company, and a contractor, and a lawyer, but you don't call me." I turned to my hysterical sister. "Maggie," I said, and my voice was sharp, "get out of the house. That air is toxic, and you're pregnant. You shouldn't have been in here at all. You need to go to the hospital and get checked for mold exposure. You and your babies." That finally broke her. The reality that her own perfect nursery was a danger zone. She burst into tears and ran out the front door, sobbing as she fumbled for her phone. My father was left alone in the hallway, standing between a weeping daughter on the lawn and a cracked wall in the nursery, trapped in the ruins of his own making. "But the bank, Rebecca, you can't call the bank," he pleaded, a final, desperate gambit. "It will ruin me. It will ruin us." "You ruined us, Dad," I said. "I'm just the one who filed the report." Aunt Carol put a firm hand on my back. "Come on, Rebecca, let's go." As we walked away, I saw my father sink down onto the porch steps, his head in his hands. He was no longer the proud patriarch. He was just a foolish old man in a broken house. Maggie, seeing us leave, shouted one last thing from the lawn. "You did this. You planned this. You wanted this to happen." I stopped and looked at her over the roof of my rental car. "No, Maggie," I said, and my voice was sad but strong. "I didn't want this. I wanted a father who valued me. I wanted a home that was safe. I gave you all the proof you needed 3 months ago. You all just decided I was the one who was disposable." I got in the car. Uncle James got in the driver's seat, and Aunt Carol got in the back. As we pulled away from the curb, I didn't look back. The entire conflict was resolved not by my anger, but by the simple, undeniable, and catastrophic weight of the truth. The house had passed its judgment. The weeks that followed were a quiet storm of legal and financial activity. I stayed with Aunt Carol and Uncle James, sleeping in their comfortable, clean, and structurally sound guest room. The anemia, now that I was out of the toxic environment and on proper supplements, began to recede. The color returned to my face, but more importantly, a profound sense of peace settled in my chest. My lawyer, Greg, was magnificent. He served my father, Ian, with the formal notice of breach of contract regarding the mortgage. As predicted, the bank's response was swift and brutal. Faced with an uninsurable, structurally failing property co-owned by a non-compliant partner, my father, and a compliant but endangered one, me, they called the loan. My father was given 90 days to either refinance the entire $300,000 mortgage in his own name, or the house would be foreclosed on and sold at auction. Of course, he couldn't refinance. No bank would touch him with his retirement income, and no bank would finance a house with a $64,500 repair bill and an active black mold infestation. He called me night after night. The calls were a pathetic cycle of rage, begging, and blaming. "You've destroyed this family, Rebecca. Your mother would be so ashamed. Please, Becca, just tell the bank it was a mistake. I'll fix the wall. I'll do it myself. This is all Maggie's fault if she hadn't come home, if you hadn't been so selfish about your room." I listened to none of it. I'd set his number to go straight to voicemail. Uncle James, as my financial proxy, handled the single, formal negotiation. My father, completely cornered, had only one option: sell the house. But no one would buy it in its current state, except for a development company that specialized in teardowns. The house, the one I had poured my love and salary into, was sold for nothing more than the land value. After the original mortgage was paid off, there was just over $50,000 left. As co-owner, I was legally entitled to half. My father, in a final act of spite, tried to fight it, claiming my share should be used to pay for the damages, like the spilled paint. The arbitrator Greg hired laughed his lawyer out of the room. The day the sale closed, I received a wire transfer for $25,000. It was a fraction of what I had put in, but it felt like a victory. My father and Maggie were forced to move out. With no money and no home, they had to accept Aunt Carol's cold, pragmatic offer. She found them a small, subsidized 2-bedroom apartment across town, co-signing the lease herself just to get them off the street. My car, which was legally mine, was retrieved by Greg. I sold it the next day. The last I heard, Maggie had her twins. They were healthy, thankfully. She and my father are living in that tiny apartment, subsisting on his meager retirement checks and her childcare benefits. The golden child and her enabler trapped in a reality of their own making. As for me, I took my $25,000, combined it with my own savings, and put a down payment on a beautiful, brand-new condo downtown in a building I had consulted on. It was high up, full of light, and had the cleanest air imaginable. Aunt Carol and Uncle James helped me move in. As we stood on my new balcony, looking out over the city skyline, my aunt squeezed my arm. "I'm so proud of you, Rebecca," she said, her eyes shining. "You did the hardest thing. You chose yourself." I smiled, breathing in the fresh, clean air. I had lost a house and a family, but I had gained my health, my future, and my self-respect. The foundation of my old life had been rotten, and it had to be demolished to build something new, something strong, something that was all mine.